Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session on clarifying meaning and use. I'm Kezzy Moynihan, and I'll be taking you through the lesson today. So, to start, when we are clarifying meaning and use, we have to think about the first things that students will want to know, namely, what does that mean, the word or the phrase? When can I use it? In order to be an effective teacher and to help students understand these ideas, teachers need to be able to do two things. One, teachers need to understand how to convey and explore meaning and use in context, and also how to check understanding and apply new phrases and structures after they have been learnt. So let's look at an example word and some of the difficulties students might have when learning it. Here we have a variety of different meanings and contexts for a single word, bow or bow. As you can see, it has multiple meanings and therefore multiple uses. It can be a type of greeting, a type of weapon, an area, a part of a ship, a ribbon tied in a specific way, or a long stick to play certain instruments like a violin. Quite complicated for students. So how, as a teacher, can we examine the different ways this word is used? When exploring and clarifying meaning, there are three things we need to think about and three different ways we can explore it. We can use a text. We can use a visual. Or we can use a scenario. Next, I'm going to show you an example of a teacher either using a text, a visual, or a scenario to clarify the meaning of bow or bow, depending on its meaning. Its pronunciation is different. So, first we have an example text. The attic had a number of bizarre items that neither Arno or Elena had much use for. A few broken clocks, a box filled with odd screws and nails, and even a dusty, broken bow, which had clearly left its combat days long behind. Through this text, the teacher can ask a variety of questions to clarify the meaning of bow. So first, the teacher explores the meaning by referring to the context and asking the learners, were the things in the attic useful? No. Where in the text does it tell you the answer? It says items that neither Arno or Elena had much use for. Then the teacher can clarify, so the things in the attic aren't useful. Why is the bow not useful? It's broken. Why does it mention its combat days? Because it's a type of weapon, but it's broken. So here we're conveying the idea that this bow is not an instrument bow. It's not a bow that you tie. It is a bow that is used in combat or fighting. So of course it must be a bow. Next, we'll look at an visual example. So here we have three different visuals of a bow, a type of ribbon being used. These types of visuals work best with concrete items and often with descriptive language like hot, cold, hungry. They don't work very well if you're trying to use abstract things. For example, philosophy is very hard to check and convey with a visual. So be selective. Next, we're going to look at a scenario. So the student says to the teacher, "Teacher, what does 'he bowed deeply' mean?" The teacher responds, "So, in England, when we meet people that we don't know, we usually shake hands. In some countries, it's more common to hug or kiss. In other places, people don't touch at all. In Japan, for example, people usually bend at the hip. The deeper you do it, the more respect you are showing. And then you can mime bowing. This is called bowing. So here the teacher has used a scenario to clarify in which cultures bowing happens, why it happens, and in what places it might not be appropriate. So for example, in a country like Italy, where people are much more prone to hug or kiss or touch, even when meeting strangers, bowing would not be seen as culturally appropriate. Now, we're going to look at checking and applying meaning.
Se ti è piaciuto questo video, ti consigliamo di seguirci sul nostro canale YouTube. Troverai moltissime altre curiosità interessanti.
So once we've conveyed and explored that meaning, we want to check that the students understand it and know how to use it. Through this, we can use things like concept checking questions, often called CCQs. We can use visuals like timelines or scales. We can ask questions that refer to the who, what, where, when, why of the phrase. So who was doing it? Why were they doing it? When were they doing it? We can elicit more examples from the students. So ask them to work with the language to come up with an example. Or we can ask the learners personalized questions to make it fit into their own context. Now we're going to look at a couple of examples of teachers using one of these methods here to clarify and check meaning. I'm going to show you each one, and I want you to have a think. What technique is the teacher using to check the meaning? Viviana, can you name any successful entrepreneurs? Salim, what else might a teacher confiscate? What do you think the teacher is doing here? What technique are they applying? Next one. Rita, what did your parents make you do when you were young? What did your parents make you do when you were young? Next. Nazi, which one do you think is correct? How often do you clean or wash your hair? Hilal, show me a frown.
Se ti è piaciuto questo video, ti consigliamo di seguirci sul nostro canale YouTube. Troverai moltissime altre curiosità interessanti.
Pause the recording and either discuss with a partner or think yourself. Okay, welcome back. So, in the first one, you can see that the teacher is trying to elicit further examples from the students. So can you name any successful entrepreneurs? The teacher might be looking for things like Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Steve Jobs, famous entrepreneurs. If a student says something like Barack Obama, that demonstrates that they've not understood that entrepreneur is someone who creates and sets up a business, in theory from scratch, from nothing, and it's something unique and successful. Salim, what else might a teacher confiscate? Again, answers to this might be something like a phone or a weapon or the answers. If the student were to say something like homework, again, that demonstrates that the student hasn't fully understood. So sometimes eliciting an example also acts as a concept checking question. If you wanted to make this more of an obvious CCQ, instead of making it what else might a teacher confiscate, you could ask students, do teachers confiscate homework? No. Do teachers confiscate phones? Sometimes. Why do they confiscate phones? When students are using them in class to text their friends. Would a teacher confiscate shoes? No. What about if the shoes played music? Maybe. With Rita, what did your parents make you do? Again, eliciting personalized examples and also getting them to think about the what kind of things were you made to do, personalizing it and also getting more examples. Nazi, which one do you think is correct? Checking their understanding by asking them which one they think makes sense. How often do you clean or wash your hair? Again, another personalized example. But in this case, clean your hair or wash your hair, you're asking the student to think which one is correct. In English, we don't clean our hair, we wash our hair. And finally, Hilal, show me a frown. You're asking students to visualize it, give you a visualization of it. A frown. Opposite of a frown, a smile. You could add another question to that. Okay, we'll do one more. Again, I'm going to show you some examples of teacher interventions and checking of meaning. Once we've had a look with a partner or by yourself, what technique is the teacher using? Could you extend what they've done?
Se ti è piaciuto questo video, ti consigliamo di seguirci sul nostro canale YouTube. Troverai moltissime altre curiosità interessanti.
Eliane, what other things are people often afraid of? Afraid of spiders, afraid of snakes, afraid of the dark. Valeria, what's the opposite of hard working? Chris, where would you put freezing cold on the scale? Davi, what is another way to say, you're driving me up the wall? You're driving me. With a partner or by yourself, discuss which techniques or think about which techniques the teacher is using and how could you extend these clarification techniques. What would you do next? Pause the recording here. Welcome back. So with the first one, Eliane, what other things are people often afraid of? Here, the teacher is simply eliciting more examples. It could also be a personalized question. For me, the most natural extension would be to ask students, are you afraid of anything? I'm afraid of spiders. I'm not afraid of snakes. I am afraid of the dark. I'm afraid of heights. And I'm also afraid of moths. Are you afraid of any of these things? You could also ask students, what's another way to say afraid of? I'm scared of spiders. Someone who's scared of spiders is arachnophobic. Extend and extend and extend. Valeria, what's the opposite of hardworking? So here, just eliciting antonym, another of the word. You could also ask students for a synonym, hardworking, studious. You could ask students to think, do they know anyone who's hardworking? Valeria, do you think that the King of England is hardworking? Or Crystal, do you think that doctors should be hardworking? Getting them to contextualize the word and putting it in the right place in their mind so it has a personalized and contextualized meaning. Chris, where would you put freezing cold on the scale? Obviously, for language like this, scales are really, really visually clear. It's really, really simple when the language has clear scaling. So temperature, likelihood, definitely, very likely, likely, unlikely, extremely unlikely, impossible. You could extend this by asking them, what's the coldest place in in the world. Things like that. You could get them to rank countries in order of temperature. Italy, Russia, Australia, South Argentina, the UK. And last of all, Davi, what is another way to say you're driving me up the wall? Here, the teacher is asking the student to extend and give them other examples. A very obvious extension would be to ask the student, what kind of things drive you up the wall? Or the answer they're looking for here, drive you mad. Thank you very much, and I hope today's session has been useful for you. Bye.